If you're thinking about taking a security deposit from a tenant, you should hear the story of Taneka Davis, as told by Taneka and her attorney Jordana Greenman. Taneka is a housing provider from Peabody, Massachusetts, who decided to sell her property to move out of state with her husband. Although she gave her tenant reasonable notice, the tenant refused to leave, which forced Taneka to turn to the eviction process. In order to sell her property at a reasonable price, it was crucial for Taneka to regain possession of the property. But due to an honest misunderstanding regarding security deposit regulations in Massachusetts, Taneka soon discovered that she made a fatal mistake, given the fact that the security deposit was used as an excuse to delay the eviction process significantly. At one point in the past, the point of taking the security deposit was to protect the property from damages caused by the tenant. But over time, the focus on protecting the property shifted towards protecting the tenant's deposit, which then took a radical turn. And upon taking that radical turn, the situation has gotten out of hand for many property owners who don't know the rules. Therefore, it's important to listen to this conversation carefully to avoid falling into the security deposit trap. Hello, everyone. My name is Amir Shahsavari. I'm the Vice President of the Small Property Owners Association, also known as SPOA, which brings you episode 13 of SPOA Housing Policy Series. This is where we discuss property rights, housing policy, and all things real estate. I'm pleased to welcome back Ms. Jordana Greenman. Jordana is an attorney who represents small property owners. She's been on the program multiple times, and it's great to have her back. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Miss Taneka Davis. Taneka is a small property owner formerly from Massachusetts. She has now relocated to Texas. She's a client of Jordana's, and she's going to tell us her story today. Taneka, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Amir.
I just want to remind our members and supporters that we sent out a couple of emails containing surveys asking you how you feel about the broker fee debate, who should pay broker fees, what's going on with your different operating costs, how much your property taxes have gone up, water and sewer, etc., how you feel about the direction of rental real estate over the next year. So if you could kindly fill out those surveys and email them back to us, that would be appreciated. The return email, you'll find it in the messages because it's important to get feedback from all of you. There's a lot going on, once again, during the new year with property rights and a lot of threatening policies that taken together will affect our ability to collect our income, to pay the rising expenses, to exercise our rights, to remove difficult or non-compliant tenants, and a whole host of other issues coming down the pike. Given all the work ahead of us, I just want to remind everyone to please donate to SPOA at spoa.com/join. Again, that's www.spoa.com/join. And with that, I want to turn to Taneka. I know that you have quite the story to tell. Can you please just take us to the beginning? My understanding is that you have a rental property in Peabody, Massachusetts. You got involved in a difficult tenant situation. How did all that begin?
So it all began, my husband and I, we've always had desire of moving to Texas, better weather and, we just wanted to leave the state of Massachusetts. So we
Hmm.
bought the house in 2014. We stayed in Massachusetts for roughly in that house about 6 to 7 years. I would say 7 years. We were finally going to make the move to Texas. We put the house on the market for rent because we still wanted to keep it, still wanted a piece of Massachusetts. We still loved it there. We put it on the market in about the summertime of 2020. We had a couple of calls. Then we had the tenant that gave us a call, the potential tenant. She gave us a call in about July. We set up the appointment in August. She came, she took a look, she loved the house. So she did mention to us that, she's on Section 8. We're like, no problem. Let's go ahead and get the paperwork started. Now, this was the first time my husband and I were going to be landlords. We've never been landlords before. So we filled out the paperwork, sent it to the appropriate department. As you know, that took a very long time to get processed. I believe we wrapped up processing the paperwork and inspection on the property by December. So that delayed us moving to Texas. We ended up moving to Texas in December of 2020. I told the tenant, don't worry about the security deposit. Just pay me when you can, trying to be nice. So she paid us the security deposit of $1,500 in March the following year. At that time, we had no legal advice. We were amateurs. We didn't seek out an attorney. So I knew in Massachusetts, the security deposit law was strict, but not to that extent, because I didn't see us selling our house real quickly. And if we were going to sell, I would have hoped that it would have been an amicable, okay, tenant, I do apologize, but we're planning on selling. We're not going to renew your lease, and the tenant would just leave. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Fast forward to 2024, last year in April, things for us changed personally and family-wise and financially, where we needed to sell the property. So I reached out to the tenant, letting her know, hey, listen, I'm going to send you a mutual termination notice and a notice to quit because we need to sell our property for financial reasons. So we sent it to her. She was very hesitant in signing or trying to look for another property or trying to just move. So that's when I reached out to a realtor that I know, asking her, hey, do you know any attorneys that can assist us? Because I may need to file an eviction and no cost case against the tenant to have her leave. I was recommended to an attorney. I forgot his name, but he told me, listen, I'm going to refer you to Jordana because she's well versed on landlord tenant matters. And that's when I called Jordana and explained our story to her. She did say, no fault evictions, that can be a long process. And sometimes it just does not work out in the landlord's favor. I'm like, well, let me just give it a shot. Maybe that will scare the tenant into leaving. Jordana looked at our notice to quit that we had sent. It did lack some legality in the notice that was sent. So she resent it in April, I believe the end of April, to have the tenant vacate in June. Tenant did not vacate as the time specified on the notice. So that's when we started the eviction process. Um, when we started the eviction process, that's when discovery came into play. And all of a sudden, we got her discovery with a lot of untruth, a lot of lies. We were told that we were discriminating against her because she had Section 8. We disturbed her quiet time and enjoyment. We haven't been back to Massachusetts in 5 years, so I'm not sure how that would be possible. The only person that has ever been to that property would have been the property manager, which he would go there once a year when Section 8 does their annual inspection. And if anything needed to be fixed or repaired, we will do so in a timely manner. Then we were told she and a member in her family have a disability. That was never disclosed to us when the lease was signed initially when we met her in August of 2020 and throughout renewing the lease. So all those things came as a surprise to me. Now we're getting to the houses inhabitable. So I'm like, okay, well, I sent her a text. Let me know what needs to be fixed so that we can get it done right away. If you're claiming that it's inhabitable, what's making it inhabitable? She cannot, to this day, come up with anything that was wrong with the house because prior to leaving my husband, we renovated the house from top to bottom. So it was set and solid for anyone that would be coming in to live. The thing that got us was the security deposit. Like I mentioned, that was not placed in a separate account, escrow account for the tenant, and it was not placed in a Massachusetts account.
Mm.
So that was the big thing. That was a big thing for this case, I would say. Um,
Wow, I'm so
yeah,
sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that. And it's very
yeah,
interesting how everything was fine and good until you came across the need to make a decision because your life
right.
circumstances changed. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, all these problems suddenly popped up
Mhm.
out of the woodwork, no pun intended. And, in previous episodes with Jordana and her clients, we've heard similar stories, with a similar pattern. Before I switch to Jordana, Tanika, this was your first time as a rental property owner,
Yeah.
and this was a Section 8 tenant. Before
Mhm.
renting, I know that the security deposit issue was not too clear, and it's not clear for a lot of owners actually, just
Right.
how insanely strict it is and unfair it is. But
Mhm.
were you did you receive education or information from anyone about Section 8 itself before going into this one?
No, we did not. And that was our downfall, that we
Mm,
should have had an attorney handy, an attorney throughout the whole process.
mm,
Because you do have things that do come up, and there are things that we didn't know. And going through this whole case has taught us a lot
mm.
and educated us a lot as prior landlords, and that we can pass on that education to anyone else. So no, we did not have an attorney
Hmm.
uh, prior to doing this. No.
Well, that's a good point. Education
Yeah,
is very important.
it is.
So Jordana, when you entered the case, when the other attorney referred to you being the magical star that you are, and I don't say that sarcastically, you're incredible. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But when you entered the situation, it's clear that you started giving Tanika information about the potential danger areas and how these processes can be manipulated and delayed. What was the situation looking like when you entered, and then what happened?
So I think that, again, like you said, there's most landlords don't know all the idiosyncrasies of the Security Deposit Act. And so Tanika and I had discussed this in advance, and she had returned the entire security deposit, but misunderstood me, or somehow our communication didn't cross 100% appropriately, whereby she hadn't also given them 5% annually amortized. But then, so the day that the answer and discovery came in, I said, shoot, I didn't we talk? And she said, oh, the interest, I'll do it right now. She does it right now. The tenant returns it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was, it was looking fine. And it was going to be, I had even reached out to the tenant in the initially and said, they just want their property. They just want to sell it. This is not personal. Um, but she was very defensive, mainly because what she had was a single family home. And if you're a Section 8 tenant or any tenant with a single family home, why would you want to give that up just so you could move into an apartment building, move into a multifamily? I understand from the human point of view why she didn't want to move. But this was one of the more painful cases that I've had in the past few years, because it really showed how unbalanced we are here. That these people who left the state and literally said, I just want to sell, tried to sell to the tenant, she couldn't buy it, were prevented from doing so based on technicalities and lies,
Mhm.
because the technicality was the security deposit. But even without that, there's so much noise. The floors are defective, the ceilings are defective. What does that even mean? As I
Right.
always say, but it's it's so hard for somebody, especially when you're sitting in another state, the state where I think would be the polar opposite of Massachusetts,
Hmm.
and you say, "What do you mean it's my property?" Well, sort of, kind of. I mean, the tenant's there, but these people literally had, just from the kindness of their hearts, kept it so that she could live there. That was
Right.
part. I mean, they could have sold it back in whatever year they left in, but she wanted it. She was a ideal type tenant, single mother with kids, all that. But the fact that what I wish for the most in these cases, which is communication, why can't we talk? Why can't we have a conversation so that everybody can get what they need? And she got very defensive and very, working with people. She never even showed up in court. I think we went
No.
to court 3 times. She never even showed up. She just had the lawyer from legal services telling her not to show up and telling her to never ever sign anything.
Excuse me, but if the tenant does not show up, and presuming that the legal services attorney does not show up, then the tenant would be penalized, no?
Yes, but he was there. He
Oh,
was
he was there.
absolutely there.
Okay, he was
Absolutely.
there. And
I
if
think he
I,
lives
okay.
there or, at least close by.
Yeah. And he generated a form for the tenant to sign with check boxes, defective walls, the
His
sun and
his
the moon are
paralegal
in the
did.
wrong place. Say it again.
His
Oh,
paralegal
the
did.
the
So that's
paralegal
one
did.
of the problems that I have with certain legal services organizations is that they're using paralegals in a way that I'm not allowed to. And I don't think they're allowed to either. Paralegals are not supposed to do intakes. Or they could do an intake, but they can't give legal advice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they do. And they email me and they say, you have to talk to us now, and it's always in a situation like this where it's really worst case scenario because it wasn't even that we could do one of those tricks like request use and occupancy be paid pending a jury trial because she was paying. She
Right.
never stopped paying. So
Mm-hmm.
that was never the issue, which became problematic in this case.
Because from a certain perspective, it might have been, it would have been easier if she wasn't paying, but this is a no cause eviction. It's a different circumstance, if I'm correct. I think also when it comes to the legal services attorneys, it's correct that they are funded either by taxpayer money or by grant money. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so they take these funds and they bend the rules to their own advantage. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yes. And did I hear correctly? And Tanika, you can feel free to jump in. Did I hear correctly that at one point you tried to sell the property to the tenant? Is that right? And
Yes,
she couldn't afford it? She couldn't pay that?
correct.
Okay, correct. I
Yes,
see.
I've offered her many opportunities. I'm like, well, here's my realtor. Just send your pre-approval to her if you're still interested in buying the property. And she
Hmm.
went mute. Yeah, we tried multiple times to sell it to her because she did take good care of the property. She paid on
Hmm.
time. So why not, give her the opportunity to be the first one to buy the property, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Understood, understood. So when it came to the security deposit issue,
Mhm.
from what I know, if the property owner were to have placed the security deposit into a bank, any bank, into a separate account so that the deposit wouldn't get commingled with other monies. And at that point, then 5% interest wouldn't come into it because you could apply the interest rate that the bank would charge for an account like that, which would be much lower than that. It would probably be like point zero something. But in this case, the reason why 5% interest was recommended was because the security deposit was never put into that type of account to begin with. Is that correct?
Right.
Right. Okay. And also, Jordana, I mean, it's scary, and we don't need to tell Tanika this, of course, but there are like 6 or 7 steps that a property owner would have to follow. For example, and tell me if I'm missing anything. As soon as you deposit as soon as you put the security deposit into the interest-bearing account, you have to send a letter or maybe an email to the tenant listing the name of the bank, the account number, the date that the deposit was made, how much the interest is, and then on an annual basis, either you or someone from the bank has to send an update to the tenant every year stating that the money is still there. This is how much interest has accrued. Some people say that if the bank just sends a monthly statement to the tenant, that might satisfy the obligation. But am I right so far? Is there something missing from that?
You're supposed to pay the interest every year, actually.
So even if the tenant comes to say, if you offer the interest to the tenant, what if the tenant says, you know what, you can just keep it accruing. You can keep the interest accruing in the account. I don't want that interest. What then?
Get it in writing.
Get it in writing. Okay.
I mean, that's what I would do. I
Mm-hmm.
used to, when I lived in a managed building, I would get these checks every year for like 75 cents or whatever it was. And I would say, if I don't have an account at Citizens, I'm actually going to pay money to cash this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a check to my bank and deposit. I mean, it's too much work.
Did I miss anything? Are there other rules?
You got it. Giving them the apartment condition statement within 10 days,
Yeah.
either of the start of the tenancy or taking the money, whichever is later.
Yeah.
Um, giving them a receipt right away that says how much money they gave you and who took it, and
Mm-hmm.
then opening the account in their name and giving them the statement with the bank name, bank address, and interest. No, bank name, bank address, and account number,
Mm-hmm.
and then paying the interest every year.
Mm-hmm. And so you don't have to write down the position of the sun and the position of the moon on the day that you made the deposit, right?
I think you might though.
Yeah. I mean, what's next, right? What's
Yeah,
next?
Right.
yeah.
I'm tempted to ask, and I know there's no easy answer. I'm tempted to ask how the heck we got to that point with security deposit laws slash regulations. I've been told that, well, let me back up a little bit. So in this case, Tanika, you, per Jordana's advice, you took the interest, you took the deposit.
Mhm.
Interest was calculated and you sent it to the tenant and the tenant returned it. Jordana, how could the tenant get away with returning that? I
Because
mean,
she sent it by Zelle, so I think did she block it, Tanika?
No, so I sent it by Zelle and I put in the subject line, the interest for the security deposit, and then she sent it back to me. And then I sent her a check.
and she never deposited the check.
She never deposited the check,
The
no.
rule is also that it has to be done prior to litigation.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
so it was just like a timestamp thing, like
Uh-huh.
when she filed her answer. I mean, I gave her a chunk of it, but not the interest part. So I guess when she filed her answer and then I transferred it over right away, then that's
Hmm.
a no-no. So
I see. I see.
I mean,
S-
technically, we lost right when that happened, but
yeah.
a reasonable attorney would say to the client, you don't want to have 17 evictions in your name.
Mhm.
You should, why don't we work with these people and sign something? But they don't. That particular legal services organization, nothing or bust. They do not do anything.
Right. So one lesson is just to recap, uh, if the property owner were to have sent the deposit with the full interest up to that specific date that was owed to the tenant before submitting any notice, before technically beginning the process, this would not have been a problem, regardless of whether or not the tenant deposited it. All you would have to do would be to prove that you sent it. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So then at that point, the tenant returns the check and the tenant asked for summary judgment. Does that mean that she asked for a jury trial?
She
She
did.
did.
She
Yeah.
did. And so that viewers understand, because Jordana, you've gone over this tactic before, this delays the situation significantly while you're waiting for that jury trial.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you got hit with that news, and then what happened?
I mean, we kept trying to, do something, but
Negotiate?
there
Yeah.
was no, there was none. There was no willingness, nothing.
Mm.
It was
Yeah.
really awful.
So what do you think, the two of you, eventually it got to a point where this whole thing ended? And if I'm correct, it ended in such a way where the tenant stayed in the property and Taneka was forced, if I'm correct, Taneka, you were able to sell the property with the tenant occupying it, but because she was there, you had to bring your price down?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
And
So
how much,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, by what percent did you have to drop that price?
Um, I would say, I mean, honestly, we're losing at least 100,000.
Mm, mm,
Yeah,
mm.
yeah, or more,
And
or
I'm
more.
guess or more. I'm sorry. And I'm guessing that it came to that conclusion because to have gone on would have just it would have been too
It
long
would
and
have
too
been,
drawn
yeah,
out. And
yeah.
yeah. And it sounds like you probably would have Jordana, I think you mentioned earlier, either because you sent me a few notes on this. I think you said at one point the judge wanted to dismiss it and then you had to start over again.
Right, because they filed a motion for summary judgment.
Hmm.
And so what we did was we filed an assent seeking to enter on their motion because they filed it.
Hmm.
And I got to the court and the lawyer said, I never filed a motion for summary judgment, but she assented to the motion for summary judgment that I didn't file. So we just want the case dismissed. And the judge dismissed the case. He just felt like it. Like literally what happened was unreal.
Hmm.
He had no basis, which meant that if we started again, we would have the same issue.
And this must have been, was this the court up in Salem, Mass?
Yes.
What happened, whether you were, in the communications with the tenant and the legal services attorney, when did the two of you come to the point where you finally said, okay, we have to bring this to an end? And how was the final offer presented?
Well,
So,
yeah, I think
sorry.
Tanika can answer that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we found that the case was going nowhere. Again, her attorney encouraged her do not settle throughout the whole process.
Hmm.
So, Jordan and I spoke and we're like, well, you know what? Let's do this. Let's give her possession, pay for her lawyer's fee, but we want the finding to be the security deposit. So when that happens, then I can start over and I don't have that hanging over the case. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But it was just very disappointing that on that day that the judge dismissed the case totally.
Mm.
It was very shocking to me, and I think that could be, I don't know, an abuse of power. I don't know
Well,
because
it sounds like it. It sounds
yeah,
like it. And we'll
yeah.
get into that in a moment. But I'm thinking that if you had to start it over again,
Mhm.
am I right in saying that if you had tried to pay the security deposit again with the interest that you could have had another opportunity to get rid of the security deposit issue, or am I incorrect?
It was too late once litigation starts.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, you said that. So you're stuck with that, and there's no way around it until you technically would have reached that jury trial, which never really would have happened in our lifetime, right? I'm being sarcastic, but
Right. No, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what it feels like.
yeah,
Yeah. And she said,
yeah,
we think she's still there, although, the ultimate resolution was for Tanika and her husband to sell.
yeah,
And we found somebody, but they ended up having to sell it for a lot less than it was worth.
yeah.
So another poor owner now owns the property with this individual still in it, and you closed recently, is that right, Tanika?
Correct. Yeah, we
Correct.
closed recently.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, as difficult as it was, and even though it was a lesson learned the hard way, I'm sure you're feeling relieved right now.
I am, because I told my husband, I'm like, listen, I can't continue like this. This is mentally draining. It is
Hmm.
very stressful, and it just gave me a lot of anxiety just seeing her attorney's name and her and the courts, and it was just a lot. So I was like,
Definitely.
we need to just sell, and I feel at peace. Even though we lost so much,
Hmm.
I feel so much better and at peace.
Believe it or not, it could have been so much worse too.
Yes, it could have
Uh,
been. Yeah.
but the advice I get from people, and I think Jordana likely has given this advice to clients in general. I've heard it from Attorney Vetstein and other attorneys I've talked to. They typically recommend that owners forego the security deposit. Just don't, in Massachusetts anyway, because every state's
Mhm.
different. But they say simply, don't take the deposit because there's so many complications surrounding that deposit. If a tenant were to damage your apartment beyond natural wear and tear standards, you're likely better off repairing that damage on your own, taking the tax deduction for the repair, and then pursuing the tenant separately for the damage if it's significant enough, as opposed to holding on to the deposit and then getting punished over ridiculous nonsense just because you didn't send them the notice on time, or you didn't do this correctly or that correctly. It seems that the tenant could get away with not being on time with rent had that happened, or if the tenant had not followed the rules of the house in whatever way, there's more leniency there. But if you mess up on one tiny little thing of no consequence, then it's your neck on the line, essentially. um there are
And
people. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Amir, I just wanted to interject. And it's so funny because Jordan and I, we did the no cause eviction. And
Hmm.
then after we sent her the notice, then a lot of things start coming up with her. We
Hmm.
heard that she installed a pool in the backyard, which is,
Wow.
yeah, it's a lease violation. She had an unauthorized pet. So at that point, it was already too late. And for me to send a cause eviction notice for a lease violation, we'll have to then restart the whole process again. And I feel like it's just unfair because they would probably have her cure the violations. They'll probably tell her,
Mhm.
okay, well, take down the pool or get rid of the dog or whatever. So it was just an unfortunate situation where we sent the no cause, and then after all these things started to resurface, and I learned about all of this from from someone. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So
Wow. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
You mentioned abuse of power. The judge,
Mm.
Jordana, and I'll, you can feel free to weigh in, Tanika, but anyone can take this. Why? What's up with that? I know that these judges have immense power, but what's wrong with them?
He, I, I don't want to say everything that I really think, but
Mm.
in part, he's new.
Hmm.
He was frustrated. He seemed like he was having a bad day. I was really upset because that day, Tanika was on Zoom and she somehow got like kicked out of the Zoom right before the hearing started. So she didn't get to see any of it. I don't know if I'm wearing a crown now, but
That's all right. You deserve it.
it's you know, so I thought it would have been helpful if he could have seen her because I think that he does maybe sometimes be persuaded by what people look like. And assumes because the lawyer kept referring to Tanika and her husband as the company. Because remember, they had an LLC, so they were the
Mm.
company, as if it's Bank of America.
Yeah. That's a
And
common issue. Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that was part of the issue is that he
Hmm.
didn't see her, he didn't realize that this was an actual human being
Right,
that was a part of this.
right.
And I also think that court has is letting a lot slide with that particular legal services organization.
I see. Yeah. I mean, just because you have an LLC and you're entitled to have an LLC, but you're a small business, you're not a large corporation. And this ties into the common theme we've heard before, as stated by Jordana, that the system refuses to acknowledge that people like you and me exist, the small mom and pop property owner. They always look at us as being what we're not. I'm not knocking the big corporations. I mean, I'm not saying that they're bad by definition just because they're huge, but even there, it goes back to that old stereotype that we have money growing in the backyard on trees and we're not vulnerable, and that's just not the way it is. And it sounds like, and I'm gathering this just based on comments that Jordana has made in previous episodes, there was a time at one point when owners were probably and likely abusing tenants in the worst ways imaginable, dating back to the 1800s. So people got together and they got really strict with the laws, but in the process of that, they went too far, and no one has bothered to look back ever since. And a lot of people have been victimized by that as a result.
Right.
Right, right. I mean, I know of owners who, as stated earlier, they refuse to accept security deposits unless they are renting a luxury type apartment with very expensive amenities in it, and they don't want to take any risks, but otherwise, it has become too risky. I'm just curious because there are two different complications at play. I know that the security deposit was a huge part of this. Was Section 8 ever a huge part of this? Because I imagine that there's a lot of that there must be draconian issues and regulations there. Did the fact that this tenant was a Section 8 tenant, did that come into the equation at all?
The biggest issue is that what people don't realize when they start agreeing to Section 8 tenants, which I totally believe in. I have no problem with Section 8 tenants, but what people don't understand is that the Section 8 organization is not there to be your therapist or anything like that. They're there to pay their portion of the rent. They do not, and I mean do not, help with anything else.
No.
So it's very frustrating because you think, Taneka kept telling them like, well, she's doing this and that, and like, you're going to have to get a lawyer and go to court. It's just, it's hard.
It sounds it. It definitely sounds it. Is it true that if this were a situation where the tenant stopped paying the rent, that Section 8 would stop paying its share, regardless of why the tenant stopped paying the rent, if that were to have
No,
happened?
that wouldn't happen that quickly. This is one of the saddest stories because this is one of the ones that if everybody just act like a human being,
Yes.
it really would have been fine. It really, really would have been. I came to have a great new friend named Taneka in Texas, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to
Yeah.
visit Texas eventually. And but none of it needed to happen. She didn't do anything wrong.
Certainly not. Certainly not. Tanika, being in Texas, because there are other states in this country that are the opposite. They are friendly towards the so-called landlord, the small business owner, business owners in general. I understand that Texas is one of those states that has a much friendlier landscape. Are you thinking potentially once you've had a chance to recover from this that you might become a rental housing provider in Texas?
That I don't know. My husband and I were considering, but being that this whole thing traumatized me,
Of course.
I'm not sure if I want to go back into real estate again, maybe some other venture.
Hmm.
But the key takeaway from this is, um, if we do consider doing real estate again, is we're getting an attorney from the get-go, from the start.
From the
From
get-go.
the start, yes, because now that when I met Jordana and I went online, went on Google, reading through the security deposit and how detailed it was and what you need to do and what you cannot do. And I was like, oh my God. So we missed a lot of steps. We missed a lot of things as
Hmm.
new landlords. So that would be my key takeaway, an attorney from the start.
That's valuable
Yeah.
information. I mean, the common theme that I've been hearing is that people are so disappointed and traumatized by this experience when they go through an
Mhm.
eviction in Massachusetts. And there are
Yeah.
owners who do win and they do succeed, but it's different. Cases are
Right.
different, but they're so traumatized after their experience here that they want to relocate to other states with the idea of eventually starting over in a different
Mhm.
landscape. And time will tell for you. This is too recent, it's too fresh.
Right.
And I hope that
And
sooner rather than
mhm.
later that you can feel peace after this trauma that you've gone through.
Right. And Amir, I was, saying to Jordana, I was willing to take a loss because that was our negligence with the security deposit. So I was willing to take a loss and start over. But when he dismissed it without any findings, that's what hurt me the most because that's just gonna prolong a case that will never end, you know,
Of course, of course. And
never
I think
ending.
Never ending. Yeah, never ending. It is, it's just devastating each time we hear stories like this. Jordana, at one point you were talking about possibly sending these testimonials and these videos, these episodes to the governor's council. There must be, and if I'm correct, is that the right body that oversees this type of thing, these abuses of power? Is that the
What I
place?
heard recently, very, very recently, like within the past couple of days, is that we should all be submitting complaints to the admin office of the housing court, which I know it's on the sixth floor downtown at the Edward Brook Courthouse. I need to know who the email person is because last time I checked, the email contact was the judge who had this case because he used to work in the admin office and I used to send complaints to him.
I
But so I
see.
have to figure out who took that position because apparently the Chief Justice of the Housing Court is very unhappy with the Northeast Housing Court right now because this type of thing is happening all over the place. It just seems like no man's land with what's called Northeast Legal Aid just sort of running the show. And
Hmm.
it's really awful because they have paralegals practicing law, they have paralegals contacting my clients directly. They have doing all these things that I would lose my license if I did.
This really sounds like a mafia type situation in the world of attorneys. Is that kind of, am I exaggerating or what?
Yeah, no.
No, I wish I was. I really wish I was. I mean, that's terrible. So the governor's council is the place to start. I have no problem on behalf of SPOA beginning that process at this point because we've recorded several of these discussions with these types of stories. I think we have, and we will continue to do this with other guests because each story is different in its own way. They're all tragic, but they all expose different nuances in the system and different pitfalls. So I think we have enough evidence now to at least begin that process. I think that's very important. As far as takeaways for people watching this who are now thinking twice about the security deposit, it's all unfortunate. It's all unfortunate, but and anyone, either of you can take this because Tanika, I'm pretty sure that you know just as much as an attorney by the end of this ordeal. What advice would you give to people about the security deposit situation as well as the Section 8?
Security deposit, I would say, and had I known that, I would not have taken it. So I would
Hmm.
definitely give potential landlords or people who are looking to do real estate, do not take that security deposit. It's just the laws, it's very strict and it's very detailed. And if you miss one bullet point, it's like you are reprimanded
Mm.
for that. So I would say just forego on it.
It's a
Um,
trap. It's a trap,
yeah,
right?
it's a trap. It is a trap. It is a trap.
Right.
And
And it
for
shouldn't be. It
yeah,
shouldn't be because it's supposed to help you if your tenant damages your property.
Right.
I understand that it needs to be kept in a separate account. I understand all of that. What I don't understand is the vicious penalty,
mhm.
especially for somebody like Tanika.
Well, at some point historically, it didn't become about protecting the owner's property anymore. It just became about protecting the tenant's deposit, and then they took it way too far. And these bullet points that Tanika mentioned, are there at least 6 to 8 of them, Jordana?
Yeah.
And Tanika, with regard to Section 8, any final thoughts there?
Section 8 is great. I appreciate the fact that they give everyone an opportunity to rent almost anywhere and potentially become homeowners.
Hmm.
Because what I'm learning is that some tenants can use their voucher to purchase property.
Hmm.
However, I just feel like there is a lack of, how would you call it? Like whenever I do call, I do speak with the director. She's great in responding to me and everything, but everything it's, well, speak to your attorney. Well, we
Hmm.
can't provide this advice. We only provide the payments. It's just you get nowhere with them. So I don't know. I
Hmm.
just don't know. Yeah. And it's it's one of those things where they're also very strict with the property itself,
Hmm.
with inspections every year and I remember one of the inspections that we did last year with the smoke detectors, which was actually on the discovery as well when she said it was inhabitable. Um, she took down the smoke detector and didn't replace it with the battery. And in the lease agreement, it stated that the tenant is responsible for maintaining the smoke detector and changing the battery. And she took it down, didn't put it back. And the inspector came and it was not where it was supposed to be. So we did get a fail on that as well. So it's just things like those. I don't know. It's just very, very unfair and very stressful.
It certainly is. It
Yeah.
certainly is. It's okay if you don't know this because I know this whole situation is fresh. Has anyone researched whether or not security deposit laws are what they happen to be in Texas? I'm pretty sure they're nowhere near as complicated as Massachusetts.
I haven't, but that's something that I'm definitely going to look at and compare and contrast. But yeah,
Right.
I don't think it's anywhere near Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, I don't hear a lot of cases of
Mhm.
landlord tenant and as much as I do in Massachusetts.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I just feel, Amir, that with all of this going on, I know there's already housing shortage in Massachusetts, but with small landlords, it's going to even be worse because the law and how landlords are treated, we are discouraged from wanting to do rental again, for wanting to rent to anyone again. Um, 5 years ago, I would encourage like my peers, yeah, you should definitely do it. But now my views have changed, and I would never encourage anyone to do that in the state of Massachusetts. I'm sorry.
I don't blame you. I don't blame
Yeah,
you at all.
sorry.
It's tragic because it's a very sensitive ecosystem.
Yeah.
And when the small property owner gets hurt and leaves the business, it harms everybody. It has a
Mhm.
negative impact on costs and prices because the housing supply becomes more scarce, costs go
Right.
up, tenants get hurt, all other business owners who rely on us in other industries, I mean, they get hit. It's really a bad situation. And then
Yeah.
at the end of the day, either the huge corporations come to snatch the property, or if tenant activists get their way, the government takes it, and the government is really the worst landlord of all.
Mhm.
Which not everybody realizes that, but if you look at public housing, I defy anyone to say that those public housing buildings are run better than the way we do it in the private sector, especially the mom and pops who are more likely to do what they're supposed to do. Not saying that the big companies don't, but just
Mhm.
given how intimately we're involved, how directly we're involved, it's vital to support small owners. And I would say if you ever get involved in Texas, if there's a property owner support group or a group like SPOA down there, definitely join it.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works in places where owners don't have to worry about everything that we have to worry about here. I think that the reason why Massachusetts is so lopsided in favor of tenants is because you have a lot of tenant activists here. And I would hope that the owners in Texas and other places that are more friendly and more balanced would represent just to make sure that the system remains that way.
Right.
Jordana, any closing thoughts?
No, I totally agree with everything you just said, especially because I got a call from a woman who lives in public housing today, sounding like she had a really nasty, horrifying case that she was trying to sue the landlord. I mean, I politely declined, but it was just both surprising and not surprising to hear this.
Right, right. Well, to our viewers watching, if you want to share your experiences with either security deposit problems or Section 8, feel free to send us an email. We're definitely going to have more conversations like this in the future. Tanika, I want to thank you once again for your courage and your determination. Congratulations on just, knowing that this situation is done. But hopefully, my hope for the future is that in your new setting, once you've had a chance to rest a little bit, that you'll go back to the rental housing business in a place that's safer, because I can tell that you're the type of person who would be conscientious, who would do the job really well, and it's just a matter of making sure that you find the right people to work with. So may God bless you,
Thank
and
you.
thank you so much for
Thank you
talking
so
to
much.
us today.
Mhm.
Jordana, thank you for
Thank
everything
you.
that you do. I will start thinking about planning the process of reaching out to the Governor's Council, and we will work on that.
Yes.
Ladies, thank you
Okay.
so very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Yes,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Amanda. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Jordana. It was a pleasure
Thank
speaking
you.
with you both.
And just one more thing. If you decide to deduct from the security deposit, you have to remember to give the tenant an itemized list of the damages and how much it cost, and you have to provide the tenant with either invoices or receipts. If you need more information on the security deposit rules as a whole, you can refer to the website written on the bottom of the screen. And you can also go to our website, SPOA.com, and under the webinar section, you can find this video and read the video description. The website address will be provided there as well. We thank you for joining us. Until our next episode, my name is Amir Shahsavari, and I wish you well.